Morning, everybody. I'm Kelly Glissmeyer. Appreciate you coming today. We're going to tie, how many of you were here last year when I tied my articulated salmon fly? Were you here? We're going to tie an articulated dry fly. First of its kind. It was published in the fall issue of Fly Tire magazine last fall. And it's called KG's Booty Shaker. You can see that. I don't know if you can see that, but you can. I've got this up here with the recipe on the back. You can come up and get that when we're done. One of my cards. But Umpqua just looks like they're picking it up. I dropped off some flies to them today, so it really is a unique fly, one of a kind, since this issue of Fly Tire that just came out had a guy that had an article in there with an articulated mayfly dry. So this was the first of its kind as a dry fly, and then they got that one that just came around this issue. So it's been a fun fly to tie. The challenge we have with this one is it took me about 2 years in development trying to figure all the different nuances of how to make this fly work. So it landed on the water right, so it looked right, had the right profile, and most importantly, that it caught fish. If you get a fish a fly, you want to catch fish, obviously. So we're going to start this out with. I tied the back end, the abdomen of the fly, on a articulation shank. All that is it's straight in one end, got a ring eye on the other, and this will be the base for the abdomen of this fly. We're going to take that shank and put it in the vise. I use different sizes, obviously, for whether I'm tying a salmon fly or a golden stone or a squala. Okay, and I use a little bit different, a little bit smaller one for quite a bit smaller for the squala, and it's actually a shank that's designed for nymphs, so it's a lot finer wire and lighter. And that being said, I can show you the difference in size, because there's a squala abdomen versus this one right here that's going to come clear back to here for the salmon fly. Now these aren't tied true to size. Okay, if I was tying this salmon fly true to size, I've actually got one of my original ones here from a few years ago. And see how long that is. That's a pretty big fly. This one I had an egg sac imitation on the back with that black foam. But you know, in a salmon fly, adult salmon fly is usually about that long. So it's too big. The fish will actually take the smaller versions better than if you're trying to get it tied just to the right size of what the natural is. Plus, with the male salmon flies, they are a bit shorter than the females. So you get a female that's that long and that big around, you get a male that's about that long and half as big around, and that's kind of what we're tying, and that's the one we'll show you here. And it's easier to cast, it lands better on the water, and the fish take it, I think, better than they take those bigger ones. So a couple things we're going to do as I tie flies, as I've developed flies. One of the things I like to do is make sure that I use triggers. A damselfly trigger, or the big bulbous eyes, damselfly nymph, big bulbous eyes at the front of the fly, and a tail that really wiggles. So I use marabou and big melted mono eyes on that. Here, salmon flies, in their joints, joints where their legs attach in between segments, they have bright orange, and so they got those highlights in their body. So I use this thread to tie this fly. because I want those highlights to show up. I also will use the bright orange sparkle rubber legs to accomplish the same thing. A little bit of a trigger. Okay. So the shank. This is about 40 millimeters on the shank. I tied a lot of these when I was first starting with them on these big long fish skull articulation shanks, but the eye's too big, and I'm trying to find something smaller, and it's been very difficult to find the right one for the salmon fly. So what this shank is this is actually a hook shank that I've cut off to the right length. So I have to find 3X or 4X long lighter wire hooks. You want them lighter because this is a dry pattern. You want it to float well and not sink. So we're going to attach our thread. I always do it with the opening to the hook, the ring on the eye up. I don't know if it'll ever come undone, but I don't want it to open up and drop off the back end of the fly just because I faced it the wrong direction. So we're just going to attach our thread there and take that right back down to the back of the right to the edge of the vise. I eyeball these. You know, I don't have much in there. I don't know if you can see inside the vise jaws. Can you see in there? See the silver? That's all I have attached in there that's holding this steady in those vise jaws, and so there's just the smallest amount hanging on in there. So I want to take this back as far as I can to start this, and I'm going to tie a pronounced thread bump right there. What I'll take now is a rust-colored goose biot. And we'll grab 2 of those off of this feather. I love goose biots. Are a wonderful imitation of a stonefly tail. They really are. And so I'll take this rust-colored goose biot and I'll lay it on there, and about 3/8 of an inch. I'll tie that, and then I'll tie it in so it's because of that thread bump, it flares it up like that. We'll take the other one, and I eyeball this too. I'll look down on it like this to get the measurement right, where I think it's going to be about exactly the same, and then tie that down once, and then I'll come back up with my thread and tie that down. Now, if I work this right, you see I can tie that and tie them right down like that. They make a good base for the foam that's going to go over the top. Now we'll take our thread right back. Now I pre-cut these foam pieces. On the abdomen, there's 4 width sizes of foam for this fly. The lighter color that I use for the abdomen is the narrowest. The peach, the salmon colored foam. It's 2 millimeter foam, by the way. And then the piece for the top of the abdomen is wider, as you can see. Can you see that? Okay. And there's a reason for that, and I'll explain that in just a minute. Let me trim this piece off just a little bit. I eyeball these. I just cut these by hand. Some guy says, why don't you lay them down and cut them with a razor? They'll be exact. He says, because when I'm done tying, you wouldn't know that they started out different because of how it ends up. So we're going to take first the bottom piece. We're going to cut a soft point in that. You understand what I mean by a soft point? It doesn't go to a sharp point. Okay. We're going to take that and lay it right on the bottom of that shank, and take a good solid wrap of thread. See how that went? And then we're going to, I'll rotate that around so I can see it, and wrap that right back to where those tails are tied in. Now we'll take the same, the piece here of the chocolate colored foam. Now you can use whatever color scheme you want. I've got some in here you see a lot brighter orange that I'll tie, and I also tie some that with the salmon color with a black foam like that. So a lot of different colorations. And then when you're done, you can come in here with markers and mark these up a little bit to make them not look so even. But I've found that the fish don't care. Okay. So another soft point. If I could cut straight, that'd look a lot better as a soft point. We'll just lay that with the big piece of the foam going over the back of the fly, tied down just that soft point tip in there. The back end of this fly is going to be a little smaller, and that's why you got that long angle on it. And I'll tie that right back to the tails again. Now we're not going to go too far with the thread. So I want the top piece of foam laying straight back this way, the bottom piece of foam down, but I want them even so they're centered on the hook shank this way, okay? So now we'll take this first little piece, and I just want to get the smallest amount, and only two wraps right there. The top piece, we're going to take that and pull it over. We'll take 2 wraps again. That's all. I'll actually pinch that a little bit around there so they come down close to touching. The rest of these will touch. That back piece doesn't because it's so small. You want that kept a little smaller. So now you see I pull these back like this, take my thread back and attach it to the shank. Okay, so now I'm tying on the shank again. And I'll just go up a little bit further in width than this. Just a little bit further, make this segment just a little bit bigger. And they'll progressively get bigger as we go up the hook shank. So 2 wraps there. If you do too many wraps as you're applying this foam, it'll get really wide and look wrong. So now this is why the top piece of foam is wider than the bottom piece. Because now this top piece is, I do the bottom first all the time. Whenever I'm tying this, in any step, I tie the bottom piece on first. Now I take this top piece and I just kind of fold that foam over like that and take those 2 wraps over the top. I'm not too concerned if this is spinning on the shank a little bit, because when we're done it'll be glued down fore and aft, and so it won't spin. But now you can see, first off, a little bit larger segment here. But if you look right here at the edge, this top edge is actually hanging over the bottom edge just a little bit, and there's a reason. There's that top edge, and the reason I cut it wider is it acts as a pontoon and keeps that thing the right way in the water, okay? It took me 2 years to come up with this fly, 2 years of R&D to figure these little things out, and this is one of those little things that had to happen to make this fly work. So now we got our thread back on the shank. We're going to go forward just a little bit farther. I got new bobbins. They're great bobbins. They're C&F bobbins. The only problem is I haven't been able to adjust the tension quite right, and so they're a little too loose for me. So now we're just going to do the same thing that I've been doing all along, progressively going forward, and 1, 2 wraps, and lay that chocolate piece over the top the same way. I'm going to have to readjust that shank. 1, 2, one more on that one. Then I'll come right up behind the eye for my last piece, but let me just adjust this a little bit. That's seemingly wanting to come undone. I need it to be solid. So we're going to add a step here in just a second that's keeps this thing secure. We're going to do the 1, 2. You see where I'm right behind that shank eye with that. And before I do the top piece now, I'll take some super glue. And I used to use the one, with a fine tip, and you'd squeeze a little bit on there. You'd get a needle, and it was always really messy. So I went to a brush. And if you haven't learned the beauties of the brush, you ought to. You can put it right where you need it, just as much as you need. You can take some off if you need to. But this fixes this to the shank now, and it'll be there for good. And we'll tie on that, or tie that glued my fingertips together right there. 1, 2, put one more on that one. Now we'll pull everything back, go back onto the shank like that, and with, oh, here's the problem with this, with that short, because it's a hook shank and not a regular articulation shank, you don't have much to grab onto, so it's easy to lose it. So, but I'm going to pull that back. I'll take another wrap and I'll do a couple of double half hitches. Sorry. This thing doesn't want to cooperate at all today. I don't normally have that many problems. I have a lot of problems, but you could whip finish that. If you're a whip finisher, that's how you do that. This is where you do that. And I'll do about 3 of those sets of double half hitches. I don't whip finish at all. I just do double half hitches. I can, by the time you've picked up your whip finish tool, hooked it up, whip finished, and been done, I'm done and starting on the next fly. So, just my personal preference. So, okay, now you see how that finishes up. There's that the shank eye right there in the middle. You've got your segments, and you got 4 segments, and I do that on all of them, whether I'm doing a smaller squala, a medium-sized golden stone, or this salmon fly. This is the 4 segments, and you try to get progressively larger. Now I'll pinch these 2 pieces of foam together like that, and I'll take my scissors and I'll cut this foam straight across, right angle, just like that. So now I got these little duck lip kind of things here. On the top edge, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to cut off the corners. I'm going to leave a little square tab at the end. So I'm going to cut off the ears here. I call it cutting off the ears, just like that. Okay. Remember the 2 years it took to figure this out? This is part of that, because this is an important step in how the abdomen works against the thorax when it's all attached to the hook. Now on the bottom, I'm going to come in here and cut out a V-notch. So I'm going to take that deep enough that it almost goes to the thread wraps where it secured this, because what I want to do is I want to get this down there far enough that the shank eye is able to be open. And so these little wings right here, these little wings actually act as the bumpers to keep this thing centered on the back of the hook once I get it tied on. So you see how that, can you see the eye there? But this will ride, you'll see that in a second. So now, we're done there. I glued it in the front. I told you I glue it fore and aft, and so what I'll do is I'll come in here with my pliers, cutters, wire cutters, and I'll cut off that piece just like that. And that's when I come back in here with the super glue and brush that right across the back end, right in that spot right there. It glues the tails, it glues the foam, it glues the thread. If I were to leave that, if you'll notice, you can see that wad of thread, that thread bump that I put in there, you can see it right there. And if I weren't to glue that, that would unravel and it'd all come undone eventually. So there's the abdomen portion of the KG's booty shaker. And we'll just set that aside here. And we'll grab a hook. Now, here's the other part of the development of the fly, the hook size. And I had to find a hook that was the right length from behind the hook eye to where it starts making the bend. It had to be the right length. This is the length of the thorax of this fly. Okay. I also had to have a wider gape than most hooks of this size. And so this is a Gamakatsu B10S hook, stinger hook. They use it in articulated flies, but for the back end hook rather than the front end hook. Plus this hook is so strong, I'm on the pro staff of Semper fly. That's what the thread is here. I was tying with this hook, and I had some nano silk on there from Semper Fly. And Gary Barnes, who's the U.S. rep on that, and a good friend, came, and I was tying it, and I was talking to somebody like I'm talking to you, and he grabbed that bobbin from behind and pulled it clear down. And he pulled it down so that hook shank came down and it touched the hook point, and the thread broke. That nano silk thread is almost indestructible, but that thread broke when he got it clear down here because it couldn't go any farther. And when it broke, that hook flipped back up, and it twisted the hook in the vise so that the shank was actually oriented like that, but there was no bend. This had not come together and bent in between the gape. It's that strong. It is a real light hook, but it's that strong, light wire. So it's got a big hook gape so that with all the foam that's going to be on here, it hooks fish. So part of the development again, finding the right hook. So this is a size 8 for the salmon flies. I use a size 6 or a size 10 for the golden stones and the squalas. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing here. This is part 2 of the fly. We'll attach our thread right behind the eye and take it clear back to just before it starts to make the bend. We'll stop right there, and I'll take some 8-pound monofilament, just like that. I use Maxima Ultra Green 8-pound monofilament. Now we're going to take that 8-pound monofilament, and I'm just going to tie that on the far side of the top of the shank. And don't get confused. I don't want it on the far side of the middle of the shank or the far side of the bottom of the shank. I want it on the far side of the top of the shank. Does that make sense? Can you see how I did that? It actually rides, if this is the shank, it's riding on the far side, it's up there. And the other piece is going to come in next to it up on top there, okay, when I'm done. So now we're back to the abdomen. We're going to run that monofilament. You see how it goes right through that hook, that shank eye. And I just run that up. I don't worry too much about where it's positioned yet, and I'll run that up just like that. So what I want to do is I want to get this positioned so it's mostly horizontal here with the rest of the hook shank. But what I want it to do is that. Okay, here's the unique property of this fly and why it's one of a kind so far. The first of its kind. Like I said, Fly Tire came out with one this month that some guy did on an articulated mayfly dry fly. But this is the first of its kind ever. We've had articulated nymphs, we've had articulated streamers, now we've got an articulated dry fly. So let's just talk about that for just a second. When the salmon fly hits the water, and they hit with a pretty good splat, and that's actually a trigger too for the fish. That gets their attention because if it's salmon fly season, stonefly season, they know that sound. And so that is either laying eggs or got blown in by the water. So here's the thorax. Here's the abdomen, okay? Well, they try to crawl on the surface film of the water, and they do that. They don't break that surface tension normally. Some of their body they do, but with their legs are up there, so they're wiggling like that. That's the reason I use rubber legs on this fly, so it shows that wiggle. But as they wiggle to the right to try to crawl, their abdomen kicks to the right. As they wiggle left, and it goes like that. That's the whole point of this fly. You see that? That's the whole point. And you see now why the little outriggers here with that V-notch keep that in the right position. Now the next step that I tie, there's a reason that I have this piece on the top here, because of so that it doesn't flip itself over like that. See how it could do that now, but it won't when I do the next step after I glue this. So anytime I tie something hard like monofilament onto a hook shank, especially if it's for articulation, I want to glue that. You want that to be stuck to that hook shank. You don't want to see if I'm aggressively and fast casting these against the shore out of a drift boat because it's that time of the year when the salmon flies are on the water. I hook this back end in a branch or something. If it's not glued, it'll pull out and you'll have to have another fly. And these flies they take a little while to tie, and And in the stores, they won't be cheap. Like I said, Umpqua just picked it up, so they'll be selling that out of their catalog soon, I hope. So I glue that. We want this to be a solid fly going forward. Now, one of my next steps here is I'll take the same foam that I'll use for the top of the thorax, a little bit wider piece. I'll take that and cut about a 3/4 inch piece, fold it in half like that. And then I'll cut that into it's a soft point, but it's not as soft as the other ones. It's almost a point. You see that? And I'll lay that, get my thread back here. This is an important step, again, in part of the development of figuring out how this fly is going to work, and is I'll take that foam and I'll kiss that abdomen piece. It won't stay kissed for long because as I wrap this down, it'll pull this forward just a little bit. So I'll wrap that back to about half of its length, maybe a little farther, so that I've got just that. Now you see the little gap that appeared once I did that. And I'll wrap this down fairly tight. What this acts as is it acts as a bumper for that abdomen piece. It also acts as a ramp for my hair wing. We don't want the hair on this to lay back like on a lot of flies. We're going to use elk hair, bleached elk hair. We don't want it to lay back because then it impedes this action of the abdomen. So we want it to stand up a little bit, and I'll show you that in a couple of ways that I make that happen. So bleached elk hair for this, the salmon fly, I want to get the longest hair I can get because I need everything I can get to make this work. You wouldn't believe how many, you look at that and it looks all uniform. They look like they're all the same size. There's long, short, extra long in there. We'll take my scissors and we'll take a pretty good chunk out of here. The reason don't ever, whenever you're tying a hair wing, don't ever start with what you think you're going to end up with exactly, because as I told you, short and long, all that stuff. Hey, Dave? Getting some feedback. Don't know if you can fix that, but.
You want some feedback?
No, I'm getting some feedback.
Nice fly. How's that for feedback?
Thanks.
Okay.
So, do you see the longs and shorts? You can see them there now. So, I'll grasp that, and I like to get all the fluff out. Now, you can grab another tool like a comb or something like that. I've already got my scissors right here in front of me, and so I just brush that through that a few times, and it's all gone. So pretty simple. So now we'll just throw that in the stacker. I like a nice, neat wing. I don't always get them, but I like them. So. Those nice tips. And it's got a curve. You see the curve? So I always start with the curve just like that in my fingers when I pull that out. And I'll come back here. I'll try to get any of the shorter ones out that are on that side. And then I'll come back here and grab by the tips. And you'll see all the shorter hairs that come out this way. So, and as you can see, the wing is, I'll try to get any stubby ones out and any ones that might be a little too long so I don't have to restack it. You see the curve is mostly up that way. You won't find hair that's naturally exactly straight. You'll always find it with a little curve. Where I want this to go is I want it to go just past the tips of the tails. That's just like that. So I'm going to grab that right up here, pinch it. I'm going to take my thread now. This is a good trick to watch when you're doing big hair rings like on a stimulator or something like that, or this fly. You'll come out, I'll go 1, 2, 3 times. Now watch the thread. It doesn't stop, it doesn't get hung up. I pull on that and it rolls right around that that hair and takes it right down to the hook shank. So it's keeping all this hair nice and bundled up in one spot so it's not rolling over the hook. Because that's what happens is your hair rolls over the hook if you let it. This is a good step for any type of hair that you do. Here's the next good step for any type of hair you do. Once you pull that down, you see that flare? I'll take a couple of good solid wraps right there where I tied it in. Now just take your thread through the butts. And what you've done is you're attaching that in a whole bunch of different points now. Elk hair caddis, you tie those. That's the best tip I can give you, is don't just tie it in that one. You see that one collar because you've tied several wraps in there. But if you tie it through the butts, you can still stand this up and you can clip that like you would on an elk hair caddis head. Here I'm going to clip all the butts off as short as I can get them. I'm going to rotate those back up. You see how they still rolled over. And if that had been, if I hadn't have done the wraps around it, the whole thing would have rolled. So it's very important that you get that step right. So now we'll just come in here with good sharp scissors. Fly tying is heck on scissors when it comes to, especially when you're using hair and foam. And wire's a whole different thing. Get a good pair of wire cutters to cut wire when you're using wire, rather than your good tying scissors. I have I sell scissor sharpeners, so you're not having to buy scissors all the time when they get dull, and you don't have to take them somewhere and pay the same price for a brand new pair of scissors. So this is what I recover all my scissors with, and it's a great little tool, the best one you'll ever own. So we're going to come back here and now bring that back through the butts like that, and I'm going to tie it just back just a little bit tighter right against that foam ramp, that bumper that I put in. Bring my thread forward. See how that works? And now we'll take a little glue again. We'll brush that through the hair butts now. You want this thing to just stay solid. One of the challenges you have when you're tying like an elk hair caddis or stimulator is the wing rotating, moving after the fact too, not just when you're tying it in. Another thing to remember is when you're tying a wing for a fly like this or a stimulator. Stimulators are interesting because all they do is use a little bit of a hair tail, and most guys tie them too long. Okay, you don't want too long of a hair tail, clump of hair for the tail on a stimulator. And so then when you get up to the front, after you've done all the abdomen, you're working on the wing, you're tying that wing, and 9 times out of 10 when you see wings on stimulators, especially from beginners, the wing is going to be about this long, and it'll reach to about right here. What you want in this, in proportion wise, is you want, once you get your wing tied in, you want it tied in the length so that if you're doing arc between the tips of the tails and the tips of the wings, you'd have this perfectly round arc just like that. So that has your wing long enough to go with your tails, okay? But normally what you see is a short wing and the tail sticking clear back there. So just remember that. So now we're going to build the abdomen with foam. Once again, the bottom of the abdomen is a little bit wider than the top of the thorax foam. Sorry, the bottom of the light color, the bottom of the thorax is wider than the top of the abdomen foam. So this is the third size as you go up in size. And so we'll take that, another soft point, and we'll tie that right in on the bottom. And these are easier pieces to tie in because of how they're oriented on the hook. So I turn that over so it's facing me, and I get that so my thread goes right up to the back of the eye of the hook. Okay? And I'll take the thread back, and here's the widest piece, and that one's not as wide as I'd like. Oh, there it is right there. This is the widest piece, the top of the thorax. Take that, we'll cut another.
And at 12:15 in the flight time here, we have Paul Serpent. I've never seen Paul.
Soft point there. And we'll just tie that in right on top of the hook, face it forward. And I'll just hold that so it wraps down tight, and I'll just eyeball it from behind here to make sure that I'm up against the eye of the hook the way I want it. Another thing about the choosing this hook is the hook eye is it's a straight eye coming out level this way, okay, and that's for a reason too. And this we come up with a bullet head, just a bullet head in the foam for this fly. So salmon fly heads are quite small, so we're just going to tie quite a small head here. Two wraps there. We're going to take the top piece over. On the front of the thorax here, the pieces of foam might barely kiss. It won't usually hang over too much, but the top piece is still a little wider. Even if they don't really fit tight, it's still a little wider, and it still helps orient the fly in the water column. So now we want to get our thread right up to the base of the hair, and now we'll take this piece of the bottom of the thorax foam. You see what I did? I let it follow the curve of the hook and tucked it in so the point stabbed it. So now it's out of my way. Okay, so now we'll take that thread. I want to get it to grab it back as far as I possibly can, to get as much of that as I can. You see how that is right there? You see it? Then I'll try to pinch that around there a little bit to have it wrap, and then I'll take 2 wraps again. Now, that's the bottom piece. The top piece, we're going to come in here, just fold it over the top. Hopefully it'll overlap or kiss that bottom piece really well. 2 wraps. Usually I have to spin this back just a little bit so that all the pieces come together right. So, one more wrap around all of them together. Now this, remember I cut ears off of the top of the abdomen and a notch out of the bottom of the abdomen. Here I'm going to take this top piece. I'm going to cut that square, and out of the top I'm going to cut out the notch, the V notch. The reason being is if you know what the armor looks like on wing pads of salmon flies, they have that little notch in them like that at the top. On the bottom, we're going to come in here and I'll pull that out now. Make sure everything's centered the way it should be on the hook. And we'll come and cut that off square also, kind of short square. You can see that. And here we'll cut the ears off the bottom rather than the top. What that serves is if you look at this as that's together like that, that kind of gives a continuity of the bottom of the fly. Okay, so it can like the body continues through there and it doesn't have a big gap. It's got a gap, but not a big gap. Okay, last step. Take these orange barred, fluorescent orange barred flutter legs, and they've got sparkle in them. And I cut these for the salmon flies about 2 inches long. Come on. And these legs, once they're on the fly, in the water, and they'll break the surface film usually. They'll be wiggling around and look like the real deal. Now I don't put 3 on each side. Okay, I know fish can't count. They do know some things. You know, I had a conversation with Denny Rickards, Stillwater guru, about his Stillwater nymph. I asked, why doesn't he put eyes on the Stillwater nymph? He said, he was kind of condescending. He says, what, do you think that the fish notices whether they have big eyes or not? I said, okay, you're the expert. And so I walked away. I was about 5 steps away, and the thought occurred to me. He says, dang rights they do. That's a trigger. I told you about the eyes early on here with the damsel nymphs, and they do. That's a trigger. They do notice. That's their prey. That's their living room. That's their dining room. And so it's the same thing with triggers. You just any that you can incorporate into your fly patterns you want to. A hair wing like this, or on this type of fly, a stimulator on a caddis, it's like a fluttering wing. The wings they can't get a solid fix on it because it's so many pieces standing up like that, and it's out of focus, and it's a fluttering wing, like they're either hovering in or at the surface. So these legs, you know, trigger, they wiggle. That's the whole point, is they wiggle. So I tie these in so the front is just a little bit shorter than the back, and I tie them in right at that joint right there. If I don't tie them in at the joint of the foam, you'll end up with a leg that will just squeeze right together. The joint of the foam lets that open up, okay? So we'll tie this one on the other side. Same thing, a little longer in the back than in the front. And we'll take a couple good wraps there. Try to get that one down where it opens up more. There we go. Now, this is where I finish off the fly. I'll just take and do double half hitches, a couple of them right there. And I'll pull that tight. So, last of all is I'll come in here with my glue, and we'll brush some glue right in at that joint. That catches hair, thread, legs, and foam. Okay, hair, thread, legs, and foam. And we'll do the same thing on the other side here.
Does the glue make the
So,
rubber legs brittle?
What's that?
Does the glue make the rubber legs brittle?
No. And even if it did, it'd only be right up at that one point. The rest of it's still going to wiggle. Never had an issue with it. So there's your KG's booty shaker. My son named that fly. He said, Dad, you want something that people remember? I said, okay. It shakes its booty. I will come in here after I've done all this, and I'll grab that bundle of hair, and I'll push that foam notch right around that and squeeze it, and that helps keep it all in a good position. It stays that way for the most part. So, any questions? Did you like that fly? That's pretty cool fly, isn't it? 2 years to get that figured out.